Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the Ego Chall Podcast. I am your host, Preston Byers, and as always, I am joined by Justin Binkowski. And today we're going to be previewing the fifth stage of the Call of Duty League. We're also going to be talking about possibly the final roster change of the 2021 Call of Duty League season. Depends on how things go. We're going to give our predictions for the first week of matches, which do not begin on this Thursday, begin next Thursday. I believe that is July 8th. And whatever Twitter questions we had, we tweeted out a little bit earlier in the week that we were going to be doing like a mini Q&A. Obviously, things have changed. First, I want to say the reason that we're doing the Stage 5 preview now instead of next week, because I've had some family issues, and we might not be doing the episode next week, or we might be changing around when that episode will be coming out. So we just wanted to make sure that we got the preview in and that we didn't go into Stage 5 without giving you guys the preview. So yeah, that's basically the reason behind it. We will give you updates when we have them about the next episode. Hopefully next week, next Tuesday as usual, but we'll see. So let's get right into it. How are you doing, Bink? I don't think I actually introduced you, so how are you doing?
Hey, kind of did. I'm all right. First, before we get into the show, too, just want to give a quick congratulations to you for officially becoming full-time at Gamers/Esports. So, congrats and welcome
Thank
to the
you.
club, I
Thank
guess.
you. I'm a CEO now. I have they gave me my private jet when I signed on, so me and Jim can race jets or something now and again. So I am officially full-time with Gamers. I'm continuing on as evening editor of Esports. And then I'm also working on the newest acquisition for Gamers. We got this covered, an entertainment website. It's really exciting. It didn't take too long for it to come about. And really happy with that. Happy to continue working with you and all the other people at Esports, and now we got this covered. So let's talk a little bit about Stage 5 groups. As always, we had a group drawing at the end of last week to decide which group these 10 teams would be in. As usual, I'll bring this up on stream real quick, actually. So as usual, the first seed, so that's Atlanta FaZe, since they actually won the final, or the fourth major, because they won that major, they got to pick which of the teams would go into the opposite group. Dallas Empire, because they finished second, they were the top seed in Group B to start off. So we have some really interesting groups. As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, in the VOD, or if you're watching live on Twitch. So Atlanta FaZe in Group A, they are joined by Optic Chicago, the Los Angeles Thieves, New York Subliners, Paris Legion, and London Royal Ravens. And in Group B, we have the Dallas Empire, Toronto Ultra, Minnesota Rocker, Florida Mutineers, Los Angeles Guerrillas, and Seattle Surge. Pretty interesting lineup of teams, as it is always when you get into these beginning of the groups. What do you think of these particular groups, Bink?
Yeah, it was a little interesting in the group selection show. As most people probably expected, FaZe chose to put Toronto in Dallas's group in Group B, and Dallas responded by putting Optic in A. And the reasoning, I believe Rambo was kind of saying, was that because that battle for second place between Toronto, Dallas, and New York is super close right now in the CDL point standings. His reasoning for putting Optic in that group was because he was trying to keep the second place games there in the same group or something along those lines. It didn't end up working that way because I believe Toronto then chose to send New York to Group A instead of New York getting to be in their group with them. But now that just means that match between Dallas and Toronto will be like a 20-point match or a 20-point swing in the standings, basically. So it's interesting from that standpoint. I think at this point we've kind of seen a bunch of different combinations for the groups, but there's just a lot of similarities. We're seeing Optic and FaZe again in the same group, FaZe and New York in the same group again, and then Optic and LA Thieves. I think this is like 2 or 3 stages in a row they've been in the same group. And again, we're seeing Dallas and Toronto, and then Toronto versus Florida. Florida was the only team, or were they the only team to beat? Yeah, they were the only team to beat Toronto in group play last time. So it should be interesting. I'm looking forward to it.
And obviously, since this is the fifth and final stage, there is a lot riding on these points and standings because you obviously have the bottom four. They're split between the groups. You have Paris, London, LAG, and Seattle. They're split between A and B. And then Florida, Minnesota, and the LA Thieves. Those are the only 3 teams in the top 8 currently that haven't locked in a spot in the CDL championship at this point. So it's very important for the Thieves, who we'll have a little bit talked about very shortly, and as well as Florida and Minnesota to kind of solidify their spots going into the major, because you don't really want to go into the major and have to win 1 or 2 matches to lock up your 6th or 7th seed. So should be pretty interesting. So let's move on to the roster change. So we actually have a little bit of roster mania. I believe this was pretty LA Thieves just like to screw us, and they do things right after our podcast. But they announced that John, who did not play in the inaugural season of the CDL, and until this point he had not played in the CDL. I guess he hasn't played in the CDL at this point. But former world champion John, he has joined the Los Angeles Thieves, and he will be in the starting roster, as well as Draza, who returns to the Thieves starting lineup. So the starting roster for the Thieves at this point is Slasher, Draza, Kenny, and John. Leaving out Hook again, so Hook has been benched for a 3rd time this season, but this is definitely the least surprising benching for him, because he did cause a mini roster change at the major when he did not do his COVID test and he wasn't able to make it up, and that I'm not even gonna try that word because I'm dehydrated. I don't think my brain's gonna work on that level, but that's what caused a roster change, and Draza came in. The Thieves obviously were knocked out without a win in the major, which didn't make JCap or Slasher or any of those guys really happy. What do you think of John coming into the lineup, and what do you think of Draza coming back into the lineup?
Yeah, this is another interesting one. Like you said, this is unless something completely unexpected happens over the next few days, this is probably the last roster change. Certainly the last roster change heading into stage 5. Obviously, teams might be able to tweak things with their bench and whatnot in stage 5 if necessary, but this is likely the last change we're going to see before those group play matches kick off next week. I lost my train of thought, but oh, I was gonna say, yeah. So, like you were mentioning with the Thieves, it was just another situation where this happened after we did our podcast, because it was last Thursday. Crone actually reported on the news for us at Esports earlier in the day, and then the Thieves announced it Thursday night that this was the direction they're going in. So, I've always liked John as a player. I'm excited to see him back in the league competing again. It should be interesting. He's seen some success in challengers. I haven't watched too much challengers personally, but I know he was on that E-Star team with Gravity, Jerd, and Fellow, I want to say. And they saw some success. So, looking forward to him. I mean, he's former world champion MVP. Saw success with Slasher and JCap at that champs and at other events while he was on MV. So he's always been talented, some machine gun player. The big question, at least I know it's been talked about on the flank a couple times, and the question that I'm looking forward to seeing the answer to is, who's going to run that second sub alongside John for the Thieves? Is it going to be Draza, or is Kenny going to switch back? It didn't seem Kenny was on the flank last week. I don't remember exactly when, but I know TJ showed up on the flank as well. They were talking about like a little drama behind that situation. So if you haven't watched that or listened to that, go check it out. It was pretty entertaining. But it kind of seemed like even Zuma was saying that he thinks Kenny should switch back to the sub, not because he's been underperforming on the AR or anything, but just kind of like he thinks that Kenny can do a lot of work with the 74U. So I'm going to be interested to see when we first get a look at this new Thieves iteration, which feels like the billionth Thieves iteration recently. My eyes are going to be on, seeing how John performs, obviously, but then I'm going to be interested to see who's running the sub with John and who's running that AR with Slasher.
I guess, this kind of makes me feel old, and it'll definitely make you feel old, but there's a chance that someone following competitive Call of Duty now doesn't actually even know who John is, because if
That'd be wild.
because if you came in, say, after the beginning of Modern Warfare, then he didn't play any CDL or even Challengers in the Modern Warfare season. He has obviously been very active in the Challenger scene this year, but we know that not a lot of people follow Challengers as is. So, there's I wouldn't say there's a good chance, but out of like maybe 100 Call of Duty fans, maybe there is one that actually doesn't know who John is. But yeah, former world champion. At one point, he was, I believe, the MVP of the champs that they won, when he was on Team Envy. And he's always been known to be a really talented player. I believe he was, if I'm not mistaken, he got screwed over in BO2 champs. He was supposed to be eligible because he was like in the same, he was basically like the same age as Scump, and Scump was allowed to play, John wasn't allowed to play, and I believe he was playing with Ego at the time. So just a weird situation there, but John has been really talented. He's won a lot of tournaments. He's been at the top, so it's good to see that he's back, and hopefully he can help this team out, because if they don't do well, there is a small chance that they could fall out of the top 8, although I would put it at a near zero chance just based off of how the bottom 4 teams play. But I'll just leave it at that. Are there any other things you want to talk about regarding John or Draza or this Thieves lineup before we get into the first 10 matches of Stage 5?
I remember that being like a topic, but obviously that was a really long time ago. I'm referring to what you were saying with Scump and John for Black Ops 2 champs, but I just looked it up and he played at champs and he came in 5th with Team Fear, playing alongside Moho, Assassin, and Sharp, according to Game PDSL.
Who would have?
I remember that being a thing, but you brought up a good point that there might be some people listening to this who are like, who the heck is John? And that's just something that blows my mind, to be honest, because he's been competing for so long. And I remember in particular he was a part of that Fear team in 2011 in Black Ops 1 that won the Raleigh event with Assassin, Fizzerp, and Twist. That was like, I don't think it was the first event I ever watched, but it was definitely one of the first events I ever watched. And it's a long time ago, but still kind of crazy to think that you got a valid point there saying that some people might not know who he is. So, obviously for longtime fans, people who've been around the scene for a while, they're going to be like what I was saying, excited to see him back competing again. But for the younger or newer fans of competitive Call of Duty, they're going to get a chance to see one of the top submachine gun players in COD history playing at the top level again. So, going to be a good time.
I might have gotten the event mixed up. It might have been XP because I just looked it up. Ego didn't qualify for Champs 2013, but he did qualify for XP, and the team was, I just had it. The team at that event was Ego, Killa, Terror, and RJ34. So I don't know if that is if that's the event I'm thinking of, or if I'm mistaken and I'm thinking of Ricky for some reason. I feel like I don't know. It's one of those guys, but either way, I just remember that. I don't know actually the details of it.
It was a thing, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah. So so let's talk about the beginning of Stage 5, the final stage of the Call of Duty League. We're probably a month and a half out from the end of the season, and we have 10 matches. I guess not this week, next week, because the CDL is pushing back the Seattle home series, which was set to start this Thursday. They pushed it back to the end of the season, so the Seattle home series will happen in like 3 weeks or whatever to close out the season or the regular season. But this is the New York home series. It's not like it really matters because it's just branding. But Thursday, July 8th, we have 2 matches. We have Atlanta FaZe versus London Royal Ravens and Optic Chicago versus the Paris Legion. For me, I'm not going to waste any time because I don't want to die on camera. Atlanta FaZe and Optic Chicago, I think that Paris, they did show me a little something at the major, but not enough to make me pick them over Optic and, London. They could be winning a lot of games right now, and I would still not pick them over FaZe.
Yeah, I think these are both straightforward, FaZe and Optic. I don't even think we have to waste too much time talking about it. I'd be very surprised if London or Paris pulls off an upset here.
Both of the LA teams are in action on Friday, July 9th. The Gorillas are at first. They play the Minnesota Rocker, and then the Thieves play the New York Subliners. What do you think of these 2 matches?
I think the first one is probably a little more straightforward than the second one. It's interesting, like you said, both LA teams are going to be the 2 teams that, at least so far, and most likely the only 2 teams sporting new rosters for the Stage 5 group play. As we talked about last episode, Mental, former Gears of War pro who signed with the Gorillas earlier this year, is subbing in for Chino, and he will be making his professional Call of Duty debut on Friday, July 9th against the Rocker. And that's a match I expect the Rocker to win. It's worth noting, we kind of touched on it last episode a little bit. This could, if Mental, again, I haven't watched him too much in Challengers. I believe he's running a sub in Challengers. I could be wrong. But if he is running a sub, it's similar to like a 1.5, 2-person change in the sense that it would allow Silly to move off of that second sub and back into a flex role, which we saw him have more success on earlier in the year. So that's just something to keep an eye on for the Gorillas, but I'm still going to go with the Rocker here.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Rocker and Subliners as well. I think the Subliners Thieves matchup is interesting because obviously everybody is going to be interested in seeing how John and Draza and this lineup in particular performs. At the same time, this is the Subliners team with ASIM, which you would expect, and ASIM in Dallas, because we've been talking about Dallas Formal this year. Who knows what Dallas ASIM is up to? So this actually might be really good for them as far as like online group play, because he's been playing from Toronto, and I guess, I'm sure there will be some people that say like there is some advantage for him because they might be on a different server, or if you're on a West Coast, he's definitely at a disadvantage. So it's always interesting to see how people deal with online and servers and everything. But I think him being in Dallas, his visa situation not being a distraction anymore, I think that could really help New York. So I'll go with Rocker and Subliners as well. And on Saturday, July 10th, what were you going to say?
I didn't actually pick New York, but I was going to. I was just going to bring up as a counterpoint, I guess, to what you said. But they were talking about it on the flank. That I forget exactly how Zuma was wording it, but it was something along the lines of just mentioning that ASIM didn't play with this team for just a brief period of time because of the visa issues at the major. So are like New York going to be able to just like throw him back in and click right away again, or is there going to be like a period of adjusting again? Like I know obviously they didn't play a ton with Decimate or anything, and it's not like they're making like a roster change and going back, like after a long period of time. It was just for the major, but it was something worth mentioning. I forget exactly what Zuma was saying about it, but he brought that up on one of the flank episodes I was listening to on my ride to Philly, and I just thought it was worth mentioning that it might not be, just like Asim comes back in and smooth sailing for New York. I think again, obviously this will be the episode where John is making his debut, and I'm gonna have my eyes, like I said earlier, on that second sub to see who's running it for the Thieves. But it's an interesting matchup in both sense, just because it'll be like Asim's, return, I guess you can say, getting back to action. But like you said, he'll be playing from Dallas, which could be good for the team's chemistry, all that. So it's definitely going to be an interesting match. I think at least of these first 2 days, it could end up being the closest match that we have. But I will pick New York to win it.
I also think that because these teams have an extra week, because they've never had 2 weeks in between a stage, well, I guess this season. So I think everybody probably benefits from an extra week of practice, but especially teams like the Gorillas and teams like the Thieves, where they are making that roster change, and possibly even the subliners who, like you said, are being forced to readjust to Asim back in the lineup after like a rather brief period where they probably were practicing with Decimate, and they obviously did play with him. So I think that there is a valid argument to be made about the subliners. Maybe there is an adjustment period, which is obviously unfortunate because it's not like they made a roster change and this was of their own volition. They had to do it to play at the majors. So it should be interesting to see how the subliners and Thieves match up there. So let's get on to Saturday, July 10th. We have 3 matches that day. The first match is Atlanta versus Paris. I'm just going to say Atlanta's probably going to win that. But the next 2, I mean, there is, I guess, a little bit of an interesting dynamic here. You have the Florida Mutineers versus Seattle Surge and Dallas Empire versus the Los Angeles Guerrillas. I mean, we did see an improved Seattle team on LAN, but again, this is online, so it's hard to see, or it's hard to know, which Surge is going to show up, and we don't really know how LAG are going to be with mental. So how do they match up with Dallas, who played really well on LAN? What do you think about these 3 matches?
Yeah, I think kind of like you said, FaZe versus Paris should be straightforward. FaZe takes that one, in my opinion. And then we look at it from 2 different perspectives for these next 2 matches, right? Seattle is coming off, not like an amazing run at the major, but they certainly looked better on LAN. Now they're coming back to online play. So the question for me is going to be, will they be able to take that, like that spurt of success that they saw on LAN and translate it into success online. It's going to be tough. I will still pick Florida to win this match. I think Florida's just the better team, and they should be able to handle them. But it's going to be worth keeping an eye on to see maybe if Seattle has any aspirations of actually making champs. It's obviously a must-win match. So it will be interesting to see how Seattle tries to translate their play from the major to online, but we'll obviously find out then. And then on the other side of the coin, we have Dallas, who didn't play particularly incredibly strong in Stage 4 group play, right? I believe they went 3-2, like snuck in with that 3rd seed in their group, and then they go on the strong run at the major on LAN and place coming second. So are they going to be able to take their momentum from that LAN and translate it back to online? So I guess it's kind of the same thing, but just a little bit of a different success story between Dallas and Seattle. But I still think Dallas should be able to handle the Gorillas. Obviously, we'll see more of what the Gorillas look like with mental the day before this. But I would still expect Dallas to win this one. So Saturday, July 9th, I'm going with Atlanta, Florida, and Dallas to win their games.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's I don't know. With Seattle, I wouldn't say that they did well because as much as everybody would like to gas them up and say they deserve to go to champs, they still got top 8. So it's like it is overachievement based on their performances so far this season and their placing or their placement within the standings to this point. But I definitely agree that it's basically a confidence boost because now they see that they can beat at least a few teams to win 2 matches at a major when you've only won 4 or 5 going into it. It's really definitely a confidence boost. I don't think it'll be enough. If Florida plays to the standard that we know they can play, it should be no contest, to be honest, because Florida's really, really good when they play how they should. That being said, they don't always play how they should. So that's something to keep an eye on. And for Dallas and LAG, I don't think that the mental change was made to instantly boost this team. Like you said last week, it's basically a let's see what this guy has. Like there's no point to keep him on the bench if we're paying him the CDL salary, so it's not like we're wasting money by bringing someone in and it not making a difference. It's mostly just from like a coaching and management perspective, a way to evaluate a player in game situations where you're not going to get that in challengers. Like you know how he is relative to the challenger scene now because he's been playing in it for 5-6 months. But you do at some point want to see how these players can stack up against these CDL teams. But I think Dallas is the much superior team at this point. If you would have asked me before the stage 4, I would have probably been all in on LAG making the upset. But I'm kind of out. No Money Cheen, no Preston, no P-Sog. So I'm not rocking with LAG until they can prove that they're worth to be rocked with, I guess. So I'll go with Dallas on that. Any other thoughts before we move on to the final day matches?
I'm good for that theme.
All right.
That day.
So Sunday, July 11th, final 3 matches of the first week of Stage 5. We have the LA Thieves versus London Royal Ravens, Toronto Ultra versus Minnesota Rocker, and Optic Chicago versus the New York Subliners. Obviously, that last one is the banger that people want to see because those are 2 top 5 teams playing each other. And like you mentioned earlier in the show, there is a lot of congestion basically in from 2 to 4, and then even Optic still has a chance to get into the 2nd seed depending on how well they do and how poorly some of those other teams do. But let's start at the top. We have the Thieves versus the Ravens. Who do you have there?
I'm rocking with the Thieves for this one. This might be closer than some people anticipate. We'll obviously be able to better gauge how this matchup should go down once we actually see this new Thieves roster in action. But just based on the talent on paper and London not looking the best, as assuming London keeps the roster that we saw most recently, I'm going to go with the Thieves for that one.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's hard to say because of the roster change, but London hasn't been playing especially well as of late, so there's no reason to pick them based on their performance. So I'll say Thieves as well. As far as Ultra and Minnesota, it is an interesting matchup because both of these teams, we know that Toronto will be at the CDL Championship, and if I bet on Call of Duty, I would bet that Minnesota would also make the CDL Championship based on where they are in the standings at this point and how bad basically they would need to not win at all in Stage 5 and have probably the Gorillas have a really hot 5th stage to not make the CDL Championship at this point. But that being said, I do think that Toronto is the better team here. Minnesota is not bad by any means, but I think they're more of a middle of the road team, while I actually see that Toronto is a legitimate championship contender or at least a grand finals contender if they can't beat FaZe. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going with Toronto here. I just, I think it's straightforward. Toronto looks like that, in that second tier. I still consider FaZe in a tier of their own right now if I had to do power rankings. And then the second tier right now would probably be Toronto, New York with ASIM, and then Dallas based on their most recent run. So I believe I'm going to look it up real quick from the bracket for the major. Um, yeah, Toronto. Oh no, so Toronto did lose. They lost to Atlanta and Dallas, so never mind. But that's still, the teams that came in first and second are the only two teams Toronto lost to. They didn't end up playing Minnesota at the major, and I don't remember what the site. I'm pretty sure they were in the same group for stage 4. I don't really remember. No, they weren't. So never mind. Regardless, I just think Toronto's the better team right now, so I'm going with them.
Yeah, and we have the final match of the week, Optic versus the Subliners. Two teams, like I said, that are in the top 5, vying for really very important CDL championship bracket seedings. The Subliners, because they didn't have ASIM, they kind of got screwed because they probably would have done better at the Stage 4 major with ASIM and would have gotten more CDL points, which actually would have benefited them coming into Stage 5. They would have actually had a better, they might have been in a group that didn't have FaZe in it, which would be, beneficial, I think, to any team. But that didn't happen. So we have the Subliners and Optic, and this is a really big game. It really could be, depending on how well, say, the Thieves do, it could end up being a match that decides between 3rd and 4th, because, if the Thieves do well and they go 3-2, and they're able to maybe even force a tiebreaker, one of these teams you would expect would, end up in that 3rd or 4th slot. So who do you have between the Thieves, not the Thieves, the Subliners and Optic?
I feel like I gotta go with New York here. I think again, it will obviously have a better read on New York once we see them in action earlier in their matchup against the Thieves. But just based on the last time we saw New York with ASIM play against Optic, I believe New York beat Optic at that Stage 3 major. I could be
Sounds right.
wrong, but I'm pretty sure that happened. Just because what's it called? Just because New York did get second, and I feel like they played. I'm gonna look it up while I think more, but yeah, I feel like New York's the better team if they're clicking on all cylinders with ASIM back in the lineup. So that I'm expecting New York to win that one. It will be interesting because we've noted that the Subliners have been particularly strong at hardpoint since Hydra joined the lineup for Stage 3. And, we've always talked about Optic's success being in those hardpoint or in the respawn modes. So it will be interesting to see how the series plays out from that perspective. It could come down to who ends up taking the searches. But again, I'm gonna bank on New York bouncing back to form with ASIM, and I'll pick New York to take this one.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think as long as New York, if New York does struggle in their first match of the week and there does seem to be a little, maybe, I don't know if chemistry issues would be the right way to put it, but just an adjustment period for New York with ASIM back. If there is something like that, it'll be even more interesting to see how they play against Optic because, obviously Optic is a good team and you don't want to be playing not at your best when you're up against them. So going to be an interesting matchup, but I still think that the Subliners should win that match, which would put them at 2-0 going into the second week, which is obviously a really good week for the Subliners.
I did look it up real quick. They didn't play at the Stage 3 majors. The last time they played was in Stage 3 group play, and Subliners won that one 3-1. So I believe that's what I was thinking of, because obviously that was the stage group play where New York came in first in the group because they beat FaZe and Hydra's CDL debut. So that's a lot that we haven't seen these two teams square off in a while, and should be a good one.
Yep. And that does it for the first week. Those are our predictions. Obviously, they won't be coming up this week, so we'll have a little bit to kind of think about them and see which ones were actually right and which ones were wrong. But we also have some Twitter questions, courtesy of Mike, the hard carry vessel, Mike Merchant, Merchant Vessel on Twitter. He has a few questions asked actually. The first is what words of encouragement can you give to the Paris is Winning Champs crowd heading into the final stage of the CDL season? As you are a founding member of the Paris is Winning Champs crowd, can you give Mike any words of encouragement heading into stage 5?
I really don't think I can. It's
Wow.
tough. I'm gonna try my best here, but I said I'm gonna try my best, but it's tough because as we were just going through this preview, right? In the first week of Stage 5 group play, Paris is playing Optic and then FaZe. So, as you can see, for those watching the stream or on YouTube, we've got the standings pulled up now for the entire season. Paris Legion are in 10th place right now with 90 CDL points. If they want to make champs, they have to jump up into the top 8. Right now, Florida is in 8th place with 170, so they're 80 points behind Florida at this time, which means Paris almost has to go undefeated in group play for stage 5, while Florida immensely struggles, and Paris has to go on a better run at the major than Florida to try and propel themselves into the top 8. It's possible. It just seems incredibly unlikely at this point. If I have words of encouragement for the Paris is Winning Champs crew, it's that they're at least on paper they're playing 2 of their hardest matchups in the first week of stage 5. So even if they lose these 2 matchups, there's the potential for them to, heat up in those last 2 weeks heading into the major, which if they lose these 2 matchups and let's say they win their next 3, which is still tough because they have to play New York. I'm gonna look before I say it. New York, the Thieves,
Optic, FaZe.
Yeah, so they would still have to play. Well, they're playing Optic and FaZe in the first week. That means their last 3 matches would be against Thieves, New York, and London. And those are still tough matchups. But if they were somehow able to go 3-0 in those matchups, and then gain momentum from those wins to go on a run at the major, that might be enough for them to get a spot at champs. But they would have to, basically win the major at that point, which I don't see likely, or come in second. I think second gets 60 points, so that would be 90 points for the 3 group wins, and then second place at the major. It's tough, man. It's real tough. The Paris is Winning Champs crew is in a hole right now, and it's not looking likely. But I guess the words of encouragement I can give them is they're not dead in the water yet. They have a shot. It's mathematically possible. That's the reason why, the champs field isn't locked in yet. So there's a glimmer of hope. I just don't think anything's going to come of it, but we'll see.
I'm out on the Paris is Winning Champs crowd. So my words of encouragement are, it's almost over. The off season begins in August. So you can look forward to it then. It's not like Paris is going to win any off-season, but, at least they won't have to deal with the constant disappointment. It is honestly, very, very disappointing that the team didn't end up being better than it was, because at some points during the season, they did seem to be, probably the 7th or 8th best team in the league, which, they're currently 10th, but, they could have been in the Thieves or the Mutineers position right now, because at the early stages when they had Classic in the lineup, and this is before they made any roster changes, it did seem to be that they were just kind of, I don't know, like, one step or two steps away. They would always just basically throw a game against a better team when they could have won. And then it eventually slipped away. Maybe it was confidence, maybe it was a meta change that really hurt them through the season. But I just think that the entire season has been disappointing for Paris. They were better last year, obviously. They got to the grand finals of one home series last year, which was the highlight of their season. But, I'm not going to give any words of encouragement to Mike, unfortunately, about Paris. Not at this point in the season. And that's disappointing. Hopefully, they'll be a little bit better next season. Let's move on to Mike's second question. So he said, who do you think will win Rookie of the Year? I really hadn't thought about it at all before the podcast. And now I have to think about who would actually even qualify for being a rookie. Because I don't think we can count John as a rookie. But I do think off the top of my head, unless you have someone in mind immediately,
Oh yeah, I have several in mind.
All right, so you go first and let me think about it.
Okay, so one of the big ones coming into the season was Fire, right? Fire was highly, hyped up heading into the season with Paris, and things didn't work out really for him. Another one coming into the season that was hyped up was Hydra. Obviously, Hydra has played extremely well. He has only competed with New York since Stage 3, though. So although he's played well, because of those visa issues, I think that hinders his case for Rookie of the Year at this point. Another one who I think I would have him in second place right now. Obviously, we don't know what happens in Stage 5 or Champs yet, but just based on the first 4 stages of the year, in second place, I think I have to give it to Neptune, because he is the one rookie, at least so far, who has played the entire season, like since the start. He's played in all 4 stages for Florida so far, and he's had his moments. He hasn't necessarily been to the level of Hydra's impact, obviously leading New York to a grand finals appearance. But Neptune's, for his first time competing in COD at a professional level, he's played pretty well, in my opinion. He's shown some promising moments. So I think he's in second. I don't want to leave Standy out, but again, it's similar to Hydra's situation where, he came in mid-season, had an impact for the Rocker, immediately changed things around for them, and he's played well, but again, he hasn't been here the whole season. And although Neptune has, I am going to say my Rookie of the Year right now is Insight, because although he's only played since Stage 2, he does have that championship at the Stage 2 Major, and I think that has to count for something. And obviously, Insight's been a beast. He had 18 kills, I think, in his second Search and Destroy ever in the CDL when they played that Game 5 series against the Thieves in his debut match. And he kind of hasn't looked back since. He's been incredible throughout this entire year. So at least up to this point so far through the first 4 stages, I'm going to give my Rookie of the Year nod to Insight.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to argue against Insight as Rookie of the Year at this point, because the team and individual success is there. Whereas, for Neptune, he hasn't been as good individually, at least statistically. And I think part of that is the role on the team. He's not set up to be the top guy. He's not Awakening, so he's not going to, just have incredible numbers the entire time, which obviously people do look at when they look for a Rookie of the Year or an MVP or something like that. But I also think there is a very good argument to be made for Hydra, especially depending with what goes on the rest of the season. Whatever happens in Stage 5 and Champs, then, if New York wins Champs, obviously I think Hydra's case is bolstered by that, especially because they did so poorly with that tournament right before he came into the starting lineup, and how well they've done since, barring I would say kind of an outlier just based on not having Asim at the Stage 4 major. But I think he is an incredible player. But because at this point he's played, a lot less professional Call of Duty than Insight, then I would say Insight as well as Rookie of the Year. I just think it's hard because there's never been a consensus on what a rookie is considered. I know Aches has talked about this in the past, and he's like, there are no rookies in Call of Duty because essentially you could play. Yeah, I think he said this before the CDL, but basically you can play a top level Call of Duty player on like any day of the week essentially in Call of Duty, whereas you can't go to your local gym and play basketball with Michael Jordan. So it's a little bit different in Call of Duty. There is a level of access that can be granted that isn't there in traditional sports. And Insight, he did have that top 12 performance with Singularity at Champs. So I don't know how people define, professional status. I know that it used to be top 16 at a tournament, but I also don't know if that's the correct designation.
Yeah, it's always been a point. Obviously, it was most recently a topic that was brought up. I'm referring to rookie status here. It was most recently a topic, at least in World War II, when guys like Kenny and Hook were coming back after they had already competed in AW. TJ, and then Temp competed at IW Champs with Dashy on that straight ripping team, but that World War II season was like Temp's first full season too. I'm pretty sure. So it was more of a topic back then just because those players had already played before the age limit was instituted, and then they were coming back. So it was really a question then. But this is actually, I think it's a little more clear cut in this sense, just because it's like you can say it's been their CDL debut. Like you could say it was like their CWL debut for the other stuff. You can argue it. I think it's just something that'll be phased out. Like it'll be less questioned as we get further down into the history of COD, and you have more players like Neptune, who is like a tried and true rookie this year. Like it's really his first year of professional COD action, and even just like competing in COD in general, I'm pretty sure at the highest level. So, but yeah, I mean, we have if I just go down the list right now, I'm ahead. We don't have any rookies on FaZe, none on Dallas. Toronto has Insight. New York had Diamond Con, has Hydra now. Not on Optic. Rocker has Standy. Thieves had Venom. Not going to count Draza just because Draza competed last year with OGLA. Florida has Neptune. Gorillas will have Mental when he plays in Stage 5. Paris had Fire earlier in the year. London had Afro as a rookie. They have Paul X still as a rookie. I think that's it. They made a lot of changes too. It was Parasite's first year in the CDL, not counting him as a rookie though. And Seattle didn't have rookies. So I mean, there were a lot of rookies. However you want to define it, there were a lot of players who came in and made their CDL debuts this year, and that's great to see, regardless of who you end up thinking the rookie of the year is. And although we're both leaning towards Insight at this point, we still have Stage 5 and Champs. And, like you said, if New York comes out and wins Stage 5, Hydra's right up there in that conversation. He's already in that conversation, but he could, jump over Insight in theory in our minds or in some people's minds. And then even, who knows? Florida wins Stage 5 major, kind of could throw Neptune in there. So we'll see what happens. But definitely a good question to consider at this point in the season, at least.
Mike also asked, who do you think will win CDL MVP? And this is MVP is probably the most polarizing award in sports because it depends on how you define value and how you define how you determine whether player A is more valuable to their respective team than player B. I think of it like the best example would have been for me in my head is Russell Westbrook and James Harden when they were neck and neck in the MVP race a few years ago in the NBA. Harden was on one of the best teams in the NBA and having ridiculous numbers, and Westbrook was on a middle of the road team, like a team that was definitely not going to win a championship, but you could say that he's the only reason that they would even make the playoffs. And I believe Russell Westbrook ended up winning that MVP. So I guess it just depends on how you define value and how you decide, whether a player is more valuable than another player. Do you have a specific player in mind as your MVP or who you think will be MVP?
Do you? Because I think we are going to say the same person, so I kind of want you to go first.
I want to say Simp, but I also want to say Abizi. So, can we just mix these two and just, it's kind of just the entire Atlanta FaZe roster are MVPs this season. And I think you could honestly, realistically, not trolling at all, you could make a case for every single player on FaZe's roster as the most valuable player on that team because they've all been good to great in their own ways at different times because they were obviously one of the best teams last year and now they are the best team at least to this point. I'll say Simp because I'm a simp for Simp, and I think that he is incredible. I think he's probably the most talented Call of Duty player of all time, and he will eventually likely be the best Call of Duty player of all time. He just needs more time to win championships and get rings and everything. So I'll say Simp, but a very honorable mention for Abizi in my mind.
I'm not even joking. My plan for this was to explain how I feel like FaZe has just been so dominant that you have to go with somebody on FaZe for MVP.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So I was going to say Simp. And then my backup plan was letting you go, and I was assuming you were going to pick Simp, and then I was going to say Abizi. Kind of stole my thunder. But, that just shows how good FaZe have been. We're kind of on the same page here. Obviously, we do have to give credit to, Mike saying Lord Dance in the chat. Toronto had that run in stage 2 where they looked incredible. Bance was a huge part of that, and we'll get to that in a second. But, we have the standings pulled up for those of you actually watching, not listening in audio form. FaZe are in first place in the CDL standings with 465 points. In second place behind them is Dallas at 320. So FaZe is 145 points ahead of second place. And to put that in perspective, the bottom 4 teams in the league Gorillas have 100 points, Legion have 90, and then London and Seattle have 80. So there's a bigger difference between first and second place in the standings than 9th through 12th even have total points. It's just absurd how good FaZe have been this season. Again, looking at their record, we brought it up last week in the podcast when Methods found out their match record this year for FaZe is 30-4. They've lost 4 series this entire season. So I feel like it's just so hard to argue against anyone on FaZe being an MVP. If I wanted to be super serious about my MVP voting, I would look at the stats and the KDs and kind of weigh that in. For the sake of the argument, though, you said Simp. I think that's obviously an excellent choice, but I will go with the BZ just so we don't have the same answer.
Also, to put it into even greater perspective of how dominant FaZe has been relative to the entire league, FaZe could decide to not play Call of Duty at all for the entirety of Stage 5 group play and the major, so they could forfeit essentially 6 straight matches. Dallas, the second place team, could win all 5 of their matches and then run through the major. FaZe would still finish in first and Dallas would still finish in second. That's ridiculous. It is incredible. And I think it's a testament to Atlanta's management and their coaching and obviously the players as well, because last season they were the top seed going in champs last season. They didn't win it, but they got second. They got to the first CDL Champs Grand Final, and it's look like they've been even more dominant. They've been to like nearly every single event Grand Finals in CDL history to this point. They've been to every major Grand Final this year, but even when they were at home series last year, not counting the ones that they weren't actually attending, they were at, I think, almost every single Grand Final. It's incredible. Just absolutely stunning by FaZe. And as far as stats, Simp has, this is according to Breaking Point, Simp has the number 1 overall KD in the league to this point. He has the 4th highest hardpoint KD. He has the, he has the top control kills per 10 minutes. He has the top control KD, and he has the 5th highest control damage per 10 minutes. Abizi is obviously like the search star because he is the most aggressive player maybe of all time when it comes to this stuff. He has the highest search and destroy kill per round, the 3rd highest search and destroy KD, and then no surprise, he is the highest S&D first blood rate. He gets 21% of first bloods, which is it's over 3% higher than the next player. So it's ridiculous. I would say that even, like if you kind of don't think that statistics are the way to determine the MVP, which is fair because, I mean, everybody has their opinion on that. I think Abizi does have a good argument for just he changes the way other teams play because he makes them uncomfortable. Like he plays so quickly and he is so in your face that he changes the entire game plan for some teams because they're just not used to that kind of stuff. And you could say that he helps Simp get to those numbers, which is a great argument because, without Abizi, who knows like how well Simp or Arcides or Salium are able to do. So I think anybody on FaZe you can make an argument for, but I think we can agree that Simp is the leader and that Abizi is probably second place, which is just absolutely ridiculous.
And, I don't want to touch on this and take too much time, but it's something that is always, I think, as their careers progress, it's something that we might look at. But I know Simp and Abizi both said they obviously like playing together because they're so successful. But since Abizi joined that United team in Black Ops 4 and Simp was inserted into that lineup mid-season, we have not seen Simp compete at a professional level without Abizi on his team. They've just teamed their entire time and seen all the success together. So obviously I don't think it's anything we'll see. It would be nuts if they went separate ways, and it maybe would be a point to, down the road to say who has a better career. It'd be tough to judge if they play on the same team for their entire careers. Maybe one of them want to branch out and play against each other at one time. That would certainly be an interesting storyline. But it's just, testament to how good FaZe is, and both of them are great candidates for MVP.
Yeah, if they decided to do the Brady Belichick split late in their careers and decide which of them was more important to the team's success, I'm all for it. But at the moment, there's no reason to ever split up. The Tiny Terrors are truly terrorizing the CDL, and they have for the whole CDL's existence, and then even the final season of the CWL. Let's get into Mike's last question here. Who has been the most improved player from stage 1 to now? He did kind of, give his answer in the Twitch chat. Lord Bance, who is a great candidate for most improved player because he spoke about it a little bit after the Ultra won the stage 2 major. He said that at one point he was thinking about quitting because of the negative reaction to him from fans. He didn't, it's very hard for players to take that kind of criticism, and I would say that some of it is not even criticism, it's just hate because, you have guys that I would absolutely hork on in league play. They're talking trash about Bance, a professional player. So I don't know how qualified they are to give any sort of criticism. But yeah, he thought about quitting at one point. They win the Stage 2 Major. They are still one of the best teams in the Call of Duty League. Maybe they will end up winning champs this year, which would be a great story. Obviously, Canada's only team, and this is an all-European team, which is historic because obviously I don't think any single European has won champs, and unless I'm missing anybody, I don't think so. There's only been a few European teams to even win events, so that's what made their Stage 2 Major so historic. Um, uh, do you think Bance is the most improved player, or do you have someone else in mind?
So that's with the way Mike worded his question. That's why I kind of, in our notes here, I kind of broke it down a little bit. And I'm disappointed he's put Dance in the chat because I thought I had this broken down to a T. But with the way he worded his question, who's been the most improved player from stage 1 to now? I feel like that the answer to that specific question has to be Bance, just because, again, like you said, the storyline of him dealing with the hate, potentially considering retiring, to going on to win that stage 2 major with Toronto. That's just a great storyline, and obviously he improved to the point from facing that criticism to lifting a trophy.
Yep.
So I feel like for the way Mike worded his question, Bance is the answer for me. But I wanted to take it a step further and go the most improved player from last season of the CDL in Modern Warfare to this season in Black Ops Cold War. And we've talked about him a bunch on the podcast, obviously, in various different topics. But for me, the answer to that question would be Asim. Just because, we've talked about it a lot. He was at a point where he wasn't even getting CDL offers, he said, in the off season. Not to say that he necessarily struggled last season in MW, but Minnesota went through that rough patch when they struggled online, had that losing streak, whatever. They looked good early in the season on LAN, and then transition to online kind of affected them a little bit. And regardless, Asim's been that player who's the entry quick sub, running people's faces, might not produce the best stats, but for me, he's definitely turned things around this season, going from having limited offers heading into the season to getting an offer from New York, but most likely being on the bench because, it looked like New York roster was going to be Clayster, Zuma, Hydra, and Mac, to then Zuma being forced to retire with health issues, Hydra facing visa issues. Now Asim is coming in as a bench player, and he just hasn't looked back since. Obviously, he had the most recent visa issues, which are unfortunate for him. But outside of that, he's played incredible this season. He's, not only is he still being that player who does the dirty work for his team, but he's even had absolute pop-off games where he's just producing the superstar level numbers that you expect from other players, not necessarily what you might have expected from someone with his play style last season. So I think overall for the season, from MW to Black Ops Cold War, I would say my answer was Asim. But then, like we said, to Mike's particular question from stage 1 to now, I think Bance is the answer.
Yeah, I would say Bance is probably the answer because he has been, obviously the team success is obviously a major factor in how people view, success in as a player even. I would also say that Mac deserves some praise because he had a very bad first stage. I believe he had a .7 KD or something. And we had even talked because this was early in the season and Hydra was not even in the States yet. So we didn't know, where or when that would happen. But I think we talked about it, if Mac continues to play poorly, would he be the person to get replaced by Hydra when he eventually does join the subliners? And even when Hydra was in the lineup and, obviously Diamond Con was pushed out of the subliners lineup. There was a point that they were trying reportedly to acquire Sib from FaZe and slot him in place of Mac. So even that would have been probably after the stage 3 major. So after the stage 3 major, I think
I think it was going into stage 3.
Yeah.
Stage
Okay.
2 major.
So this was just a few months ago after the stage 2 major. New York was reportedly trying to replace Mac, and I think he has played really well. I think that Hydra does have something to do with it. He's like, you could make the BZ Simp argument, like what is their effect on the other one, but I think that Mac deserves at least some mention in terms of most improved, because at times it did look like he wouldn't be in the CDL for much longer. And obviously we haven't really got to see him and this, full strength team on LAN, and so people are always going to say like he's a warrior and he isn't experienced on LAN. So I think he deserves a mention. I also think Dashy deserves a mention because he literally got benched last year. Like OGLA were just like, nope, not going to do that. Bring in Cheen. They eventually bring in Cheen for, so what was it? Cheen and Draza come up for JCap and Dashy.
It was Cheen came in for JCap, and then Draza and Hollow replaced Dashy and Chino, I believe.
So he didn't even play at Champs last year, Dashy. So it's...
he did.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. So,
you remember he was subbed in for the Piccadilly search when Kenny was having the internet issues.
Yeah. It feels like 2020 season was literally years ago now that I think about it, because I'm having PTSD of Piccadilly search now. So he was literally benched last year. I know he has gotten some flack this year from Optic fans because he's done poorly in moments, and people will say like, oh, well, if Dashy got more than, X kills, Optic would have won. I just think that everybody on Optic has been disappointing at certain moments in the season, and it's kind of led them to not be a championship contender to this point. But I think Dashy deserves some mention as well. But I'll say Bance as well because, man, like, it's an incredible story, and they're an actual championship contender. Maybe subliners are, but I think Bance is a great answer to that question. And that's all of the questions we had from Mike. We had one more question, and this is more for you than me. This is from CEO Jim, the richest man I've ever known. How many seltzers does Bink have to consume before Jim can gun him?
So I answered 42 on Twitter. I don't know. Well, do you think I was being too, lenient there? Do you think it might be more than 42? I'm thinking it might be more than 42. It might be an undefined amount of seltzers that are required for me to consume so Jim can gun me. What are your thoughts?
Well, I had to redo algebra when I was in middle school, so I don't know. Like, I guess the amount of seltzers would be X in this, and I'm not great at variables, so I think that depending on how much Bud Light you can put away, let's say that seltzers are nearly double the amount of alcohol. If you can drink 84 Bud Lights and still be able to gun Jim, maybe Jim should put away the sticks at that point. I don't know. I don't think that you drink seltzers. You should drink. You're a Best Light man, in my opinion.
Well, I've been drinking the Bud Light lemonade seltzers.
Oh, okay.
I've actually been drinking them more than the actual Best Lights until this weekend in Philly. I consumed a lot of Best Lights this weekend in Philly. But yeah, no, I like those lemonade seltzers. They're actually pretty good.
Yeah, but you get the best of both worlds. You get seltzer and Best Light. So I didn't expect the Best Light seltzer ones. So yeah, I think probably more than 42 because especially if Jim has a drink, he's probably asleep and there's no chance he's going to gun you in his sleep. Just my opinion on the matter.
Yes.
Um,
There's also, we have to take into consideration, Jim's not a COD kid anymore. I can't even tell you the last time he's turned COD on. He's been on that grind to plat that hasn't been going too well. Hopefully youngest Jim's able to turn things around and uh, beat out Bronze Steve in rank, but man, he's been slacking on the gaming. He's gonna have to pick it up.
I mean, he works CEO hours. He works night and day. He's flying from Cali to KC, back to Cali to back to KC. I mean, he just doesn't have time to slave away on the video games anymore. It's tough for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we hope that Jim does well and he's able to one day gun you in your inebriated state. I don't know if it'll actually happen, but if
I
he
don't hope that at all.
if you ever get as inebriated as Putty Squiggles was that one time we played Call of Duty, he might actually gun you because Tom was in fact faded that night, and yeah, if you ever got to that point, I think Jim could actually do it. That would be the time. I just don't know if it'll happen.
That was my birthday last year. We played the virtual drinking games, and we
Yeah.
tried to play COD after it, and it wasn't working for Tom. So it was literally a year ago since my birthday was just this last weekend.
Man, I mean, the pandemic has felt like 5 years and like 5 weeks at the same time. So it feels like a long time ago, but I don't know why I remember that so vividly.
I'm glad you reminded me.
Hope Tom is doing well. Hope Jim is doing well because Jim is not a fan of friendship at this point in time. So that kind of wraps up our show today. This was definitely the sweatiest episode of the Ego Chall podcast I have ever been part of because I will be, as soon as I click stop streaming on this podcast, I will be running into the shower and hopefully not sweating for the rest of the night because this has been a miserable experience sitting here. At least I got to talk about Call of Duty and I got to talk with you, but man, this has been really uncomfortable. So I hope this doesn't happen anymore. Do you have any final thoughts before I do my little spiel and we get on out of here?
No, you can go ahead.
All right, subscribe on whatever platform you're listening/watching on. So if you're watching on YouTube currently, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to like those videos. Make sure to share those videos. And if you're on Spotify or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast. Make sure to give us 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts as well. Follow us on Twitter. Bink is at jbink with 2 Ks, verified. I am at Prez Byers, verified. You can follow our work because I never promoted it before I was full-time, but you can follow our work at .esports.com, and I guess you can follow my work specifically at wegotThisCovered.com. You can also probably listen to the next episode of the podcast will most likely be Tuesday, July 13th. So we'll be taking a week off, so we will not be putting out an episode on July 6th, most likely. If anything changes, please check our Twitters. We will update you there. You can also follow at Ego Chall Podcast on Twitter. That's where we give you the updates and when episodes are going to be. But yeah, probably no episode next week because we did the preview. If there is an episode next week, we're really going to be BSing it because we don't have any content to really talk about unless there are some crazy, wild roster changes or something before then. So yeah, most likely we will see you guys on Tuesday, July 13th. That's all from me. Bink, take it away.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I also want to thank Mike and Jim for submitting their questions. We did, as Preston said, follow Ego Chall Podcast on Twitter because we did put out the tweet saying we were going to try to do a Q&A episode here before, obviously, we had this change in format. with our scheduling and whatnot. So that this is kind of like a little bit of a preview. Obviously, we preview Stage 5, but it's also a bit of a preview of what we're going to look to try to do potentially in the off season when we don't have actual matches to talk about. We're going to be looking for some questions or topics from you guys that you want to hear us talk about. So thanks to Mike and Jim for submitting questions for this episode, and hopefully we can get some more questions from you guys in the future. But other than that, I'm looking forward to Stage 5. We will talk to you guys about those Stage 5 Week 1 matchups whenever we decide to go live, likely, like Preston said, on Tuesday, July 13th. And until then, just always remember to send the chow.